Hello and welcome. You're watching Breaking News on TVRI World. I'm Siska Becker. This program will kickstart our extensive coverage of the G20 summit in Brazil. Let's begin. The G20 summit commences today at the Museum of Fine Arts at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The gathering will take place on the 18th and 19th November of 2024. On the first day of the summit, after the G20 leaders are officially welcomed, the first couple of sessions of meetings will then follow after, with issues discussed ranging from combating hunger and poverty to reform of global governance institutions. Now, to learn more about these critical issues and what the leaders are expected to bring into discussion on the first day of the summit, we will now go to TVRI World's Rahmat Idris, who is now right there at the Museum of Fine Arts, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, for the first day of the summit. Hello, good evening from Jakarta. Rahmat, please go ahead with your report.
Yeah, hey there, Siska. It is so good to see you all the way from a little over 15,000 kilometers from Jakarta. We are right in the thick of it, the action today, where it's all taking place right here in Rio de Janeiro, the vibrant capital of Brazil. As today we are looking at the first day of the summit of the G20, where just moments ago we are witnessing the arrivals of leaders from around the globe, notably leaders from the G20 member state, and we are talking about 19 countries and 2 unions, European Union and African unions, who will be right there walking down the red carpet over here at the Museum of Fine Arts of Rio de Janeiro. And Siska, and to all our viewers of TVRI World around the globe, we are right here at the International Media Center of the G20 Rio Summit. As today, this is the day of the summit, and right now as we're speaking, our delegates and the leaders from around the globe are making their way to greet the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. And just moments ago, we are witnessing the Director General of World Health Organizations, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus himself, the man of the COVID-19 pandemic, made his way and greet and shook the hands of President Lula da Silva. And again, while we wait for the rest of the delegates and world leaders to make their way into the main venue of the G20 Rio Summit 2024 here in Brazil, let's look back to what's been transpiring over the years under the presidency of Brazil. Again, notably, we're all aware that the G20 was born out of necessity for the economic recessions, financial recessions all around the globe that has initiated countries with the biggest economies around the globe to sort of come together to sit down on the table and get to know some of the biggest issues and try to address these challenges. And thus, over the years, the G20 has evolved from merely economic issues to other issues as well. And as geopolitical tensions has it has evolved into a more intricate issues and affairs that countries within the memberships of the G20 need to deal with. Let's talk the president of Indonesia a little less than 2 years ago over in Bali, where we witnessed some of the most significant pillars of Indonesia's presidencies, the sustainable energy and the health reformations, and also the need to sort of transform governance, which is also a carryover missions and pillars to the next presidency of the G20. And it is notable that in the past 3 years, the G20 has been under the presidency of some of the most vibrant nations within the membership of the G20. Indonesia to start, followed by India, with the summit took last year in November over in New Delhi, and this year yet another very vibrant, very lively country took over assumed the presidency of the G20 this year, Brazil. And the summit right here in Rio de Janeiro is about to roll out. All the delegates and the high-ranking officials, world leaders, notably from the members of the ASEAN, or rather the regions of the G20s and the observing countries as well. Let's go over some of the lists that have been confirmed to attend today for the summit of Rio de Janeiro, right here where we are currently reporting. It's been said that some notable international organization guests will also take part, as always, as we do have it with other summits as well throughout the years. We have the Akinwumi Adesina, the president of the African Development Bank, and also Sergio Diaz-Granados Vida, the president of CAF, and that is Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, and also the chair of Financial Stability Board, Class Knot, and Q Dong-yu, Director General of Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations, alongside the President of Inter-American Development Bank, Lan Goldfein, and Director General of International Labor Organizations, Gilbert Hongbo. Now, let's look back into the presidency of Brazil, of the G20 this year. As always, with each and every presidency of the G20, every country will propose and bring forward some of the most pertinent issues, some of the most crucial issues that the global communities are currently facing. And thus, with the Brazil presidency this year, they have been highlighting some of the most important problems that the world is currently facing under the theme of building a just world and a sustainable planet. This theme has been watered down into three different kinds of pillars that have become the foundations for the discussions, the deliberations to take place around the G20 summit. And under the leaderships with President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva as chair, and his right there at the helm, the summit will take place today. And as we know, it was preceded by numerous working group meetings all the way up to the ministerial level, and over 100 meetings, which includes the working groups. The ministerial level meetings have taken place all across Brazil. So we're talking about Sao Paulo, and also literally the biggest cities here in Brazil, and also the vibrant Rio de Janeiro, where we are reporting at the moment. Right. The three main agenda and priorities that the government of Brazil has put to the table for the summit this year and throughout the year under their presidency is the social inclusion and fight against hunger. And this has been over and over again emphasized by the president of Brazil, Lula da Silva. He said that take an example of Brazil itself, the country has been hampered by economic issues, severe recessions, and also inflation has been hampering the finance of the country, and it is brought over from the previous administrations and also exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And thus, learning from that particular lessons, it is deemed that the social inclusion and the fight against hunger, which also includes poverty, one of the biggest homework for Brazil's, and a lot of developing economies within the G20 memberships have been put to the table and become the main pillar of the priority agenda under the presidency of Brazil this year. The second one, this is something that has been also on the table of the G20, if not for the past few years, at least from the Indonesian presidency back in 2022. We remember energy transitions and sustainable development in social, economic, and environmental aspects. More focus towards environment there. As we know, the sustainable planet is one of the keywords in the theme of the G20 Brazil summit this year. And thus, in order to be able to get to the sustainable planet that has been idealized by the world leaders, it is highly important for these countries, these big economies, developing economies, to start with their energy transitions. And you are still watching our live coverage coming to you from the capital of Brazil, from the city of Rio de Janeiro. My name is Rahmat Idris. We are currently right here in the thick of it. Just across from us is the Museum of Fine Arts of Rio de Janeiro, where the world leaders are walking down the red carpets, starting by the invited guest, organization guest, and invited world leaders observing countries. And then later on, the culminations is the world leaders hailing from the G20 member states, and that is 19 countries and 2 unions, European unions and African Union. The third pillars and agenda that has been brought forward by the Brazil government this year under the leadership of President Lula da Silva is the reform of global governance institutions. And it is also highly pertinent and essential to be able to see the ways these big economies within the G20 are able to address the repercussions of global governance institutions that have gone haywire, for lack of a better word. And that is also, in a sense, a carryover theme from the New Delhi summit back in 2023, where the presidency was handed over from India to Brazil. Now, what's interesting in the current periods of the G20 presidency is that the Troika leadership system is put in place, meaning that the current leading or the assuming presidency of the country will lead the Troika members of the leaderships, and then the previous presidency, which is India, will also be a part of the Troika leadership, and then the upcoming one, which is after Brazil, is South Africa. So thus, this triangle is made up on the top by President Lula da Silva of Brazil, and also the Prime Minister of India, the previous presidency, Narendra Modi, and also the next one, South Africa, the President himself, Cyril Ramaphosa. So these Troika leadership will be able to see where the discussions, the deliberations of the G20 is taking place, and the way these leaders will navigate the discussions that are truly pertinent to the global communities. Now, we are still waiting for moments of leaders hailing from different parts of the globe, notably members of the G20, making their way down the red carpet, shaking the hands of President Lula da Silva himself before entering the main ballroom, the main venue at the Museum of Fine Arts here in Rio de Janeiro for the moments of the summit, day one, to begin. Let's go over some of the agenda that has been revealed to the press earlier today. Right here, we've been informed via the big screen behind me, if you can spot it right there. It's been revealed to us that the arrival of international delegation will take place around an hour or give or take 90 minutes, making sure that enough time for these delegates to make their way down the red carpets to greet the presidents and be settled in the main conference room. And then later at 9:30 local time, Rio time, the official opening of the summit, marked by the opening speech by President Lula da Silva himself, will be underway. Let's look again at the live pictures right now as we are having it. More world leaders are making their way, exiting their vehicles, walking down the red carpet to meet and to greet the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. And we are still coming to you from the G20 Rio summit here as we look at the live pictures from the red carpet, the arrival of world leaders, invited guests, observing countries, and later on, the culmination of it, the member states of the G20. Now, let's talk a little bit about the main venue that has the honor to host the G20 summit this year here in Brazil, the capital of Rio de Janeiro. It's called the Museu Nacional de Belas Artes, and that is the Portuguese for the Museum of Fine Arts located downtown here in Rio de Janeiro. It has a special place, this museum, to the people of Brazil, as it marks the time when it was officially established in 1937 by the initiative of Education Minister Gustavo Capanema. And the museum was then inaugurated by President Getulio Vargas in 1938. And it takes its rise in the transfer of the Portuguese court to Brazil in the early 19th century when King John VI brought along with him part of Portuguese royal collection. And when the museum was created in 1937, it became their heir, not only the National School Collection, but also its headquarters, a 1908 eclectic style building projected by Spanish architect Adolfo Morales de los Rios. Well, the Museum of Fine Arts of Rio de Janeiro, they call it the Museo Nacional de Belas Artes, is one of the most important cultural institutions of the country, as well as the most important museum of Brazilian arts, particularly rich in the 19th century paintings and sculptures. The collection includes more than 20,000 pieces among paintings, sculptures, drawings, and prints of Brazilians and international artists. The museum library has over 19,000 titles to its collection. It is massive. For lack of a better word, it is a perfect place to learn about the history of Brazil and to become the perfect host place for the summit of Rio this year. Walking down the red carpets there, we are still looking at delegates, participants, invited guests of the summit, greeted by none other the president of Brazil himself, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. For those who have just joined us right here on TVR World, we are still coming to you live from the International Media Center of the G20 Rio Summit, taking place right here in the heart of the capital of Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, where moments from now, the summit of the first day will begin, while we wait for the rest of the delegates making their ways to greet the president himself as the proud host of the G20 summit. As we witness the world leaders making their way down the red carpet, exiting their vehicles, and soon to attend in person, witnessing first-hand account of how the G20 summit will unfold today here in Rio de Janeiro. Let's go over some of the biggest initiatives and achievements under Brazil's presidency of the G20 this year. Addressing the G20 countries in India on the 10th of September 2023, which is the very start of the presidency of Brazil. Just last year, during the summit of the G20 over in New Delhi, the president of Brazil, Lula da Silva himself, announced the creation of the so-called Global Mobilization Against Climate Change Working Group. Now, this is interesting because this creations of the global mobilization, this initiative, is formed in order to create the generation of income and to reduce inequalities for the people affected by climate change. And when we talk about climate change, unfortunately, as the G20 summit unfolds here in Rio, another very important climate change summit is also taking place in another part of the world, in the Middle East, for example, in Azerbaijan and its capital Baku, where right now the conference of the parties, or the COP29, is taking place. So world leaders have been notably absent to the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, due to its overlapping schedule to the G20 summit here and the APEC summit in Lima, Peru, just a week earlier. So it is crucial time for these leaders to get together, first to discuss economy, second to discuss cooperation with the big economies in the world, and simultaneously conversing on the grave challenges of climate change. The homework that hundreds of countries around the globe, usually the COP or the Conference of Parties is attended by over 200 countries around the globe, talking about ways to reduce global warming, to address climate change, to reach the net zero emission, and more importantly, not go over the threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius of temperature rise in the planet. Meaning that if we go over the threshold, the repercussions and the impact to our environment, to the planet, is irreversible. And on that note, another focus of the Brazilian presidency will be to do a comprehensive reform of global institutions such as with the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Trade Organization in order to the reform of the United Nations Security Council to expand the voice and influence of the global South on the world stage. And that's where BRICS comes in, another very significant entity that has gained momentum in the past few months. As a matter of fact, our very own country, Indonesia, is proposing to be a part of BRICS. As you are watching live feed from the red carpet of the G20 Rio Summit here in Rio de Janeiro, we are bringing you the latest as we wait with bated breath how the summit this year will unfold. Tak bukan.
So that was Rahmat Idris, who can always be depended upon to give us the most comprehensive reporting. Thank you, Rahmat, for bringing the excitement of the opening day of the G20 summit in Brazil. But more importantly, thank you for highlighting the important and crucial issues that will be the main topic of discussions throughout the summit. And now we also like to give to our viewers the attention of how Indonesia have a crucial role in realizing the goals of the summit, namely in tackling climate change and energy transition, with the attendance of Prabowo Subianto as President of Indonesia. So here's our report on President Prabowo Subianto's arrival in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to attend the G20 summit.
President Prabowo Subianto has arrived in Brazil after attending the APEC summit in Peru. The president's agenda in Brazil is to attend the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. G20 is a forum of countries with the largest economies in the world. Prabowo will also have bilateral meetings with a number of leaders of friendly countries on the sidelines of the agenda in Rio de Janeiro. President Prabowo Subianto and his entourage arrived at the Galeão Air Force Base on Saturday evening local time. A statement from the Presidential Secretariat Office says that Prabowo was welcomed by Commander of Airbase Colonel Aviador Fabio Ferreira Silva, Ambassador of Brazil to Indonesia Jorge Monteiro Prata, Indonesian Ambassador to Brazil Edi Yusuf, and Indonesian Defense Attaché to Brazil Colonel Rizal, Ashwam, Amanda.
So that's our footage of President Prabowo Subianto first arrival at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to attend the G20 summit. And now let's go back to Rahmat Idris at Rio de Janeiro himself as he is witnessing the opening day of the summit. Rahmat, please continue with your reporting, and maybe you can also tell us your experience in seeing President Prabowo Subianto earlier today as he met with the Secretary General of UN, the Antonio Guterres. Rahmat, please go ahead.
Yeah, you're still watching a special coverage of the G20 Rio Summit. I'm Rahmat Idris. We come to you live from the International Media Center right here in the capital of Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. And right now, as we speak, another world leader is making their way on the red carpet to greet the host of the summit, the President of Brazil himself, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. And right now, walking down the step right there is the Managing Director of International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva. And as we mentioned, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, is a very significant part to the rotations or to the circles of finance around the globe. And one of the key issues, one of the fundamental principles within the G20 presidency this year under Brazil's government is the reform of the institutions, which includes World Bank and IMF. Thus, the presence or the attendance of the managing director of IMF herself, Kristalina Georgieva, is considered a very essential part of the deliberation today at the table of the summit. Antonio Guterres on his way down the red carpet to greet the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. And as a matter of fact, just yesterday, the Secretary General of the UN himself, Antonio Guterres, had a moment of bilateral meeting with the President of the Republic of Indonesia, the newly sworn-in President of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto. A lot of discussions took place, were unfolded on the table of the bilateral meeting yesterday between President Prabowo Subianto and Antonio Guterres, one of them being the salute over the stance of the United Nations fighting for equality, and very important to mention the fact that President Prabowo Subianto has been quite firm about Indonesia's stance in supporting the Palestinians, and thus world peace, endings to geopolitical conflicts and wars around the globe has been highly important for these leaders. So that was a key takeaway moment from the bilateral meeting of Prabowo Subianto, the newly sworn-in President of Indonesia, with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. And there he is, right there, standing side by side with the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, on the red carpet of the G20 Rio Summit today. It is morning time here in Rio as the summit day one, is about to unfold in just a few moments from now. We are now at the part where the invited, or rather the participating international organization guests are making their way to greet the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, which has always been the core traditions of red carpet arrival here for the G20 summits over the years. And it will be continued later on by the arrivals of expected invited guests comprising of world leaders not members of the G20, but top leaders from different observing countries of the G20, those who are keen to having bilateral meetings and discussions with their international counterparts, big economies around the globe within the G20. And this is the perfect platform for these leaders to sort of come together and discuss the most pertinent issues that big economies around the globe are facing. We are looking at the red carpet right now as more esteemed guests are making their way to greet the president of Brazil. There you have it, the president of World Bank, Ajay Banga, shaking the hands of President Lula da Silva with his red turban, very distinctive leader of World Bank. Another important institution that is addressed for the third fundamental principles within the G20 presidency of Brazil this year, the reform of global institutions. And walking down the red carpet right now on her way to greet the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, is the Director General of World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Another very integral part of the United Nations there. World Trade Organizations with the Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, herself making her way down the red carpet. Alongside Director General of International Labour Organization, Gilbert Huangbo. Well, based in Geneva, Switzerland, the World Trade Organization is an intergovernmental organization headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, that regulates and facilitates international trades. And also the International Labour Organizations, the general directors, both of them are currently greeting the President of Brazil. There you have it. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of World Trade Organization, and Gilbert Huangbo, Director General of International Labour Organizations, all geared up to be a part of the G20 Rio Summit about to unfold today here in Rio de Janeiro. And I need also to take note that the Secretary General of United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Rebecca Greenspan, was also a part of the DGs that has just greeted the President of Lula da Silva. We are going to take a quick break right now as more visuals of arrivals will return in just a few minutes.
Biden flew from Lima, Peru to Manaus, Brazil, in the largest city in the Amazon to meet with the local leaders working to preserve the rainforest. He was to head afterward to Rio de Janeiro for a summit of the group of 20 major economies that will address issues including poverty, global governance, and climate change. Biden also went to the Museum of the Amazon in Manaus, where he met with indigenous leaders who want to protect the rainforests. While at the museum, Biden signed a proclamation designating November 17 as International Conservation Day. While in the Amazon, Biden toured abroad his Marine One presidential helicopter, viewing the confluence of the Amazon and Rio Negro rivers at Manaus, spots where water levels have dropped sharply due to the worst drought in decades. Biden also went to the Museum of Amazon in Manaus, where he met with indigenous leaders who want to protect the rainforest. Biden was accompanied by Brazilian scientist and Nobel Prize winner Carlos Nobre, who was warned that Amazon may be beyond saving as deforestation has changed the weather patterns that sustain its jungle climate.
Today, I'm proud to become the first sitting American president.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the 2024 G20 Rio Summit, coming to you live from the International Media Center right here in Rio de Janeiro. And as we are witnessing world leaders making their way around the red carpet, happening as we speak right now is the arrival of Prime Minister of Singapore, Lawrence Wong, the newly sworn in Prime Minister of Singapore. Back in May 2024 this year, is right here also in Rio de Janeiro, greeting the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. One interesting fact about the presence of Lawrence Wong, Prime Minister of Singapore, right here in Brazil is that just a little over a month ago, he had a one-on-one bilateral visit, his first ever state visit to Jakarta, Indonesia, where he made an audience with the also newly sworn-in President of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto. A very close proximity between Indonesia and Singapore, and notably one of the biggest investors into Indonesia is Singapore. So there's a lot to discuss for these two world leaders from Jakarta to Rio de Janeiro. It's a good thing for these two leaders to meet again at this very platform alongside other big economies in the world, for them to sort of iron out all the details of cooperations between Indonesia and Singapore within the region of Southeast Asia and within the global framework of cooperations in the G20 and also including its observing countries. I guess it's safe to say that at this point, we are entering the expected invited guests arrivals, world leaders, not necessarily a member of the G20 or within the G20 member states, but world leaders from observing countries, observing nations, willing to be a part of the deliberation here at the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. You're still watching our live coverage from Rio de Janeiro. We're in the thick of it right now, where world leaders are making their way to be a part of a historic moment here in Rio de Janeiro, the 2024 G20 summits. And right there, walking down the red carpet, you are looking at the Prime Minister of Vietnam, His Excellency Pham Minh Chinh. Another guest invitee, a very important members of ASEAN, walking on the red carpet with his spouse, ready to greet the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. There you have it, Prime Minister of Vietnam, Pham Minh Chinh. And again, just to bring you to the attentions again to the beautiful, majestic venue of Museo de Belas Artes, or the Museums of Fine Arts here in Rio de Janeiro, where the deliberation is taking part. The Prime Minister of Vietnam currently greeting President Lula da Silva. Warm hugs there from the two world leaders, standing side by side with their spouses. And we're bringing you this report from the Museums of Fine Arts of Rio de Janeiro. As one of the most important cultural institutions of the country and the most important museums of Brazilian arts, rich in the 19th century paintings and sculptures, with over 20,000 pieces of collections, paintings, sculptures, drawings, and prints of Brazilians and international artists. Another one making their way down the red carpet, ready to greet the presidents. Let's have a look. We have with us the Prime Minister of Norway. Another guest invitee, hailing from Oslo. Walking down the red carpet is His Excellency Jonas Gahr Støre. Walking up the steps now, the Prime Minister of Norway. There you have it. Very warm exchange there from the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Støre, with the presidents of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Another important part of the deliberation today, the G20 Rio Summit, right here from Rio de Janeiro. While we wait for more world leaders making their way to greet and be a part of today's G20 Rio Summit, allow us to inform you that the security has been tight. The perimeter has been kept very tight as well, just to ensure all the deliberations and all the routes surrounding the area of the Museums of Belas Artes, or the Museum of Fine Arts of Rio, is secure. I mean, we had the first-hand accounts of hundreds upon hundreds of troops being deployed with shielded vehicles, like with better words there, all around some of the most strategic parts downtown Rio de Janeiro, leading to the Museum of Fine Arts. Another important guest there making her arrival here in Rio de Janeiro at the red carpet of the G20 summit is the President of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu Hassan. We have dozens of world leaders hailing from different parts of the globe. Another representation of an African country there, making her way up the step, is the President of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu Hassan, as another important and esteemed guest invitee. Why this is important to have an African president nation taking part in the deliberations of the G20 Rio Summit this year is the fact that another important African Union as the 21st observing country here for the summit is present, meaning that all these African countries making up the African Union is a very integral part of the summit this year, meaning that the presence of Samia Suluhu Hassan from Tanzania, the President of Tanzania, is integral to today's deliberation. Another one making his way down the red carpet. Let's look closely. Yeah, we believe that, it is the Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez. And we need to take into account the fact that Spain is a permanent member of invitee, meaning that the Prime Minister of Spain is a permanent guest invitee to the G20 summit. And the PM himself, Pedro Sanchez, is right here greeting the President of Brazil. Warm hugs there from the two world leaders. We are witnessing moments of head of states, heads of governments, going up the stairs, walking down the red carpet to greet the proud host of this year's G20 summit, the President of Rio de Janeiro. The President of Brazil here in its capital, Rio de Janeiro. Another one making his exit out of the vehicles. Let's have a look. Yeah, that is Pedro Sanchez, Prime Minister of Spain, permanent guest invitee of the G20 summit alongside his spouse. And we need to correct the previous one that made his way was the President of Paraguay, Santiago Peña, a guest invitee of the summit. And now is the Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez. There's a bit of some semblance of similarities between these two leaders. From a distance, sometimes it's quite hard to make them apart. But now we're pretty confident that the previous one was the President of Paraguay, Santiago Peña, and now we have the Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, walking up the stairs and meeting with the President of Brazil. And for those of you who have just joined us right here on TVRI World, we are coming to you live from Rio de Janeiro, where moments from now we expect the first day of the G20 summit under the presidency of Brazil will unfold. And you are looking at moments where one world leader after another makes his or her way to greet the proud host. Let's have a look at this next arrival. Walking down the red carpet now, greeted by the lined up soldiers on each part of the red carpet, is the Prime Minister of Portugal, Luis Montenegro. Apparently taking his time to bask in the glorious Museum of Fine Arts of Rio de Janeiro. Is having the time of his life there, the Prime Minister of Portugal, Luis Montenegro. Looking at the warm exchange between the two world leaders again. Another important guest invitee from Portugal, Prime Minister himself, Luis Montenegro, is here. We have another one walking on the red carpet right now. If I can look closely and correctly now, that is the president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, another esteemed guest invitee to the summit right here in Rio, walking up the steps to greet in person the president of Brazil. We are looking at a warm exchange there from the president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, standing all smiles, all happy faces there, alongside the president of Brazil, Lula da Silva. And off he goes into a transit room, joining yet another plethora of world leaders already present here at the venue of the summit. Let's look at another world leader making his way out of the car, ready to greet Mr. President, is the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, making his way on the red carpet to meet the president. You are still watching moments of arrival here on the red carpet of the G20 taking place at the Museum of Fine Arts of Rio de Janeiro. And you are looking at the Emir, or rather the leader, in another word there, that's Arabic, of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, greeting the President of Brazil. And off he goes to the transit room. Look at that, the beautiful aerial view of Rio de Janeiro. I believe it is somewhere in Botafogo, where a lot of the journalists, a lot of the main venues are located around the beautiful peninsula of Botafogo. A majestic view during the day and even more majestic at nighttime. Let's take a quick break now as we wait for more arrivals of the world leaders right here at the G20 Rio Summit. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
First of all, Your Excellency, Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres. I think Indonesia is very blessed. We are the largest reserves of geothermal energy in the world. I think about 60% of geothermal energy is in Indonesia.
We will be drowning in debt, many of them not to have the resources necessary to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, many of them not having the resources to protect their own populations against the impacts of climate change. And so there is a reform of the Security Council and the reform of international financial institutions in which we see eye to eye with Indonesia, and Indonesia has played a very important role in the Summit of the Future, and we want to go on working closely with Indonesia in the preparation.
Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto had a bilateral meeting with Secretary General of the United Nations Antonio Guterres on Sunday on the sidelines of his visit attending the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Speaking after the
First of all,
meeting,
Your
Prabowo
Excellency,
said that he reaffirmed Indonesia's commitment
Secretary
in
General
renewable energy.
of the United Nations,
President Prabowo said that the UN Secretary
His
Guterres
Excellency Mr.
greatly
Antonio
appreciates
Guterres,
Indonesia's stance on
thank you very
various
much
issues,
for
especially on
meeting with
climate
us
change,
in
and
the
that
middle of your
Indonesia
very
strongly supports
busy
efforts to
schedule.
take
I
steps
understand
in
you flew
reducing
20 hours
carbon emission.
from Baku.
President
So,
Prabowo
I
also
really,
explained that Indonesia
I really
has a big
appreciate this
potential
meeting.
in green energy development, including geothermal,
International law
hydro, solar,
This is
and
really uplifting
bioenergy.
for us. We are very ambitious.
Prabowo also extended
I
appreciation
plan
for
in my
Guterres'
new
support
administration
towards action that have been
to
taken by Indonesia.
go
The
on
meeting
several issues.
reaffirmed
We can
Indonesia's
go faster.
position as strategic
instance,
partner in global stage,
that
especially
Indonesia
in
is,
climate
for us,
change
an
issues.
extremely strategic, valuable partner in today's world.
Janeiro, as we bring you the latest from the red carpet arrival of the G20 Rio summit right here under the presidency of Brazil. You are looking at the red carpet arrival as right now the president of the European Council of the European Union, Charles Michel, is making his way alongside his spouse to greet the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. And again, the European Council is a very, very important part. I guess we're looking at the part where right now the heads of unions are making their way. The core member of the G20 are here, and in just a few moments, the deliberations, the summit will start. Right there, you are witnessing warm exchange between presidents of the European Council of the European Union, Charles Michel, alongside spouses together at the red carpet of the G20 Rio summit. And another car is pulling up the driveway there. We are now entering the phase, the periods where the core member leaders of the G20 are here. Let's take a look at who the next leaders of the entourage will be. There you have it, exiting the vehicles. We have, if I look closely from where we're standing right now, that would be the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. And this is high time for South Africa, as the country will next year assume the presidency of the G20, and is notably also a member of the Troika leadership of the G20. As I mentioned earlier, these Troika leaderships of the G20 comprises of the current presidency, the current leaders who assumed the presidency, which is Brazil, President Lula da Silva, the previous G20 presidency, India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the upcoming presidency of the G20, which is South Africa. The president of South Africa himself is right there, walking up the steps to greet the presidents, a part of the esteemed Troika leaderships of the G20. meeting in person now on behalf of South Africa. Let's look at another arrival making their way down the red carpet. Let's try and have a closer look in just a few moments now. Another arrival here for the G20 summit right here in Rio de Janeiro. Right. So what we witnessed earlier was not, as a matter of fact, indeed the President of South Africa, but rather the Presidents of Angola, João Lourenço. And now, what you're having right there on your screen is the President of Luis Arce from Bolivia, another guest invitee of the G20 Rio Summit, shaking hands and posing together with the President of Brazil. The President of Bolivia, Luis Arce. Another invited world leader right there walking down the red carpet is the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim. Another close neighbors to Indonesia, a very important ally to Indonesia in terms of leading the cooperation within the region of Southeast Asia. The Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, walking down the steps right here at the Museum of Fine Arts, Rio de Janeiro. And Indonesia was also one of the first ever state visit of Anwar Ibrahim, visiting the then President Joko Widodo. We believe in the near future, the newly sworn-in President Prabowo Subianto will have the opportunity to meet also in bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim. Walking down the red carpet in strides there, if you look at it, very high level energy of the two leaders meeting together in such warmth. Great exchange there, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva with Anwar Ibrahim of Malaysia. Now we have a sneak peek of what the summit venue, the main ballroom or conference room will be. It was a very quick sneak peek there before we wait for more arrivals making their way right here for the G20 summit. Another quick break.
The bilateral meeting between Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto and Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, took place at a hotel in Rio de Janeiro, on the sidelines of Prabowo's agenda to attend the G20 summit in Brazil. Prabowo extended appreciation for Guterres' dedication in supporting peace and international justice. The president also expressed Indonesia's commitment to support the UN and readiness to deploying peacekeeping forces if needed, especially in Palestine. President Prabowo emphasized Indonesia's commitment to supporting the United Nations effort, including on issues such as food security, poverty eradication, human rights violation, and the crisis in Palestine. The president said his support aligns with international mandates to strengthen the peace efforts in the region. Regarding the issue of Palestine, Guterres agrees with Indonesia to encourage the establishment of a state and self-determination of the Palestinian people's independence.
Very ambitious. I plan in my new administration within 10 years, but on several issues we can go faster.
Speaking on the sidelines of his activities in the G20 summit in Brazil, President Prabowo Subianto said the schedule for a possible visit to Middle East countries is being worked out. President Prabowo has been scheduled to attend the G20 summit in Brazil and then depart to the UK to have a bilateral meeting with the UK Prime Minister. President Prabowo actually wanted to return to Indonesia immediately. However, he is still trying to find the right schedule to complete all the planned visits, as have been arranged previously. Previously, President Prabowo announced his state visit agenda in a press conference before he began his initial overseas trip on Friday, November the 8th. The president is scheduled to meet with world leaders and attend several high-level conferences. After concluding the state visit to China and the United States, he continues his tour to attend two summits, the APEC summit in Lima, Peru, and the G20 summit in Brazil. After Brazil, the president is then scheduled to depart to UK to meet the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer.
Distinctive, a very integral, important part of the G20. She was present. She was personally at hand for the G20 summits in Bali back in 2022, in New Delhi in 2023, and right here, there she is again after being elected just a while ago. The president of the European Union, or rather, the president of the European Commission of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, walking up the steps. Dressed in a very distinctive European Union attire, if you would have it, resembling the very flag of European Union, blue blazer with the golden dots on the front part of her blouse, resembling all the stars on the flag of European Union. There you have it, a warm exchange between Ursula von der Leyen and President Lula da Silva.
During a press conference in Rio de Janeiro on Sunday, Guterres told journalists 2024 was well on the way to break heat records days after leaving the COP29 meeting in Baku. He also emphasized the need for peace in Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan. G20 countries account for 85% of the world's economy and are the largest contributors to multilateral development banks, helping to steer climate finance. They are also responsible for more than three-quarters of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. Reaching agreement may only get tougher with the return to power of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, who is reportedly preparing to again pull the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord. UN Climate Chief Simon Still wrote a letter to G20 leaders imploring them to act on climate finance, including boosting grants for developing nations and advancing reforms of multilateral development banks.
Biden flew from Lima, Peru to Manaus, Brazil, in the largest city in the Amazon to meet with the local leaders working to preserve the rainforest. He was to head afterward to Rio de Janeiro for a summit of the group of 20 major economies that will address issues including poverty, global governance, and climate change. Biden also went to the Museum of the Amazon in Manaus, where he met with indigenous leaders who want to protect the rainforests. While at the museum, Biden signed a proclamation designating November 17 as International Conservation Day.
Hey there, you're still watching a breaking news special reports coming to you live from the beautiful, the vibrant city of Rio de Janeiro, the capital of Brazil, where right now we are in the thick of it, the very action of the G20 Rio summit. And we have received words that moments ago, the president, the newly sworn in Prabowo Subianto of Indonesia, has made his way to the main venue of the G20 Rio summit, which is right here, the Museum of Fine Arts of Rio. There you have it, another arrival of the G20 summit, we believe, from South Korea. There you have the president of South Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, exiting the car, walking down the red carpet, making his strides towards the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Another great moment right here we are witnessing for the red carpet arrival of the G20 summit right here in Rio de Janeiro. South Korea now, Yoon Suk-yeol, walking up the elevated platform on his way to greet the president of Brazil, Lula da Silva. Another vision there. We would usually see world leader walking along their spouse, but not the case here for South Korea, as Yoon Suk-yeol walked in solo, greeting, warmly shaking the hands of President Lula da Silva. Warm exchange there between the two world leaders right now, the very core members of the G20 states, the heads of governments, heads of states have arrived right here at the red carpet of the G20 Rio de Janeiro 2024. Another photo ops there. President of South Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, alongside the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, before he enters the transit room, and everyone will be seated and settled at the main room of the conference, first day for the summit today. Another aerial view of Rio de Janeiro, the Botafogo, the Copacabana, the Ipanema of Rio de Janeiro, all these beautiful coastal sides of Brazil, as we expect each and every one of the world leaders making their way to meet the presidents. received yet another picture of arrival. Very, very soon. Very, very soon it will arrive. The cars as a part of the entourage of world leaders right here for the G20 Rio Summit. Pulling down the driveway now, moments before it exits the car. Yeah, we have the President of Mexico right there, Claudia Sheinbaum, the President of Mexico, exiting the car and walking down the red carpet to meet the President of Brazil. Ganti gambar. Of the G20 summit right here. We've been witnessing for the past hours, one by one. World leaders, invited participating organizations have arrived, and soon the day one summit, the ultimate meeting of these leaders as the culminations of over 100 working groups and even ministerial meetings within the G20 have taken place over the course of the year, right here in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, in Rio de Janeiro, culminating to this very moment of summit. The President of Mexico right there, Claudia Sheinbaum, soon will meet and greet the President of Brazil. A look of smile, very cheery face of the President of Mexico, dressed in purple to meet His Excellency Lula da Silva. Walking up the elevated platform of the Museum of Fine Arts right here in the heart of it, downtown Rio de Janeiro, looking all radiant, the President of Mexico. One of a very important and big economy in Latin America, an integral part of the G20, warmly greeting President Lula da Silva. And that was quite a very interesting photo ops there. The President of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, with President Lula da Silva. Let's take a look at another arrival right there on the red carpet, wearing shades. And he's taking it off right now. Let's have a look at the next leader arriving and soon to greet Mr. President. Right there. If I'm not mistaken, although not a core member of the G20 member states, but a very important guest invitee is, we believe it is the President of Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Very functional sunglasses there, as His Excellency President made his way to greet Excellency Lula da Silva. Yeah, we are witnessing a warm exchange there from the President of Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, shaking hands and warmly greeting the President of Brazil, and proud host of this year's G20. And there you have it. The newly sworn-in President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Prabowo Subianto, is right here walking out the red carpet and very differently pulling up the driveway in a white sedan. That's a beautiful representation there. And Indonesian flags, red and white, on each side of the red carpet, welcoming his arrival. Looking very energetic after a full day. A lot of things on his plate, starting from the visits in the UK, the US, China, all these world leaders. And also having attended APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, just a while back, less than 2 days ago, over in Lima, Peru. And there he is, right there, looking energetic, walking up the elevated platform of the Museum of Fine Arts, right here in the heart of Rio de Janeiro. Looking like he is a good spirit right there, ready to meet and greet the president of Brazil, Lula da Silva. This is a proud moment, in particular for the newly sworn-in President of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto, as in a lot of his remarks around the country and globally, he has made certain the fact that Indonesia will continue to strengthen its presence in global communities, and he will personally enhance helping navigating discussions and some of the most crucial issues and challenging matters that the world needs to face. He has over and over expressed the importance of addressing climate change and resolving conflict in Middle East, and that is involving Palestine, Lebanon, and the surrounding area. Another important arrival right there on the red carpet. Let's have a quick look. We have Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of United Kingdom. PM himself is right here, having conducted a few bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the G20 summit himself just yesterday. Today, he is right there walking up the ramp to meet the president of Brazil. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of United Kingdom. Previously, his predecessors were also present at the summits both in New Delhi and also in Bali in 2022. We remembered a bit of a shakedown during the Indonesia's presidency, where it was very dynamic, for lack of a better word, with the stepping down of Boris Johnson, and continued by Liz Truss, and now with Keir Starmer at the helm in the UK. Another important arrival right there on the red carpet. World leader making his way to greet the president of Brazil. Let's have a closer look now. We're trying to make out his appearance right now. Now the world leader's there, still wearing his shades though. Those of you who have joined us right here on TVR World, we are still coming to you live from the beautiful, the vibrant city of Rio de Janeiro, right here where TVR World is front and center in the middle of the action of it all for the G20 Rio Summit. And right now you are looking at a comprehensive coverage of the red carpet arrival of the world leaders of the G20 Rio Summit. Another one pulling up the driveway right there. Let's have a look at who's going to be. Yeah, we have His Excellency Olaf Scholz there, the Chancellor of Germany, exiting the car alongside his spouse. Another important member of the G20 has made his arrival right here at the red carpet of Rio de Janeiro G20 Summit. Mr. Olaf Scholz was also single-handedly present at the previous two summits within the G20 after he was elected as Chancellor of Germany in 2023 over in New Delhi and in 2022 over in Bali under Indonesia's presidency. Now for the third time, Mr. Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, is here again to assert the influence of Germany into the discussions, the deliberations of the G20 summit. Walking up the ramp right there is the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz. Warm exchange. Presidents of Brazil, Lula da Silva, and Olaf Scholz, Chancellor of Germany. Another important arrival right there as we have it here. The word welcome to the G20 Rio Summit is marked hugely on the wall. We are looking at moments of welcome for these world leaders. Let's have a closer look as to who it would be. Yeah, that is the Prime Minister of Japan, Shigeru Ishiba, walking up the ramp. Another important member of the G20, Japan, represented by the top leader of the nation, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. If we look back to a little over 2 years ago, under the presidency of Indonesia, the various team G20 summits under Indonesia's presidency, we have the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, the then Prime Minister, attending the summit of G20 over in Bali. But during the foreign ministers' meeting, it was marred by the shooting of the former Prime Minister of Japan. A history, a dark history, in which the Japanese hope will not repeat itself. Ohayou gozaimasu. A warm exchange there between the Prime Minister of Japan, Shigeru Ishiba, and the presidents of Brazil. Views of some beautiful parts of the beautiful city Rio de Janeiro, the marking of G20 all across the city. Joyous and very honorable occasions for these world leaders to come together to essentially butt their heads, brainstorming of ways in addressing some of the gravest challenges that the global communities are currently facing and to come up with the solutions. And we are here coming to you live from the International Media Center of the G20 Summit. Another entourage of cars of world leaders have arrived. Let's have a closer look. It is, yeah, from the flag of it, it seems it's going to be Turkey. We expect President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to make his arrival very, very soon to the venue of the summit. Right there, about to exit his car, and the president of Turkey. Like Mr. Erdogan has also been a very outspoken person on the issues of global peace, particularly when it comes to Palestinian causes and issues, alongside his spouse right there, First Lady of Turkey. The President and First Lady walking together side by side on their way to greet the President of Brazil. Another very integral part of the G20 member states, Turkey. His Excellency Tayyip Recep Erdogan and spouse are now walking up the elevated platform on their way to greet the President of Brazil. There you have it, about to meet the President of Brazil himself, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, with the President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Right, you're looking at another picture of arrival right there, a group of vehicles approaching the main venue, the very entrance of the G20 Rio summit right here, as we look forward to the next world leader making his or her way into the main venue. Yeah, you have Emmanuel Macron, the president of French. Mr. Macron has been known very outspoken in some of the most crucial issues pertaining to immigration and welfare of the French people. And for a change, he is arriving alone right here in Rio de Janeiro. No spouse alongside him. And France is just on the heels of being a very successful host of the 2024 Paris Olympics, bringing over some of the fondest memories, beautiful venues, just majestic places alongside the Seine River, being used as the sports venues during the Paris Olympics 2024. And on the heels of that, the president himself, Emmanuel Macron, is here for the G20 summit. I guess that's a first for today's red carpet arrival. A bit of a quick run there. He couldn't wait to just meet and greet and shake hands with the president of Brazil. He was actually running up the elevated platform. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, a very, very warm exchange there with the presidents of Brazil, right here happening at the G20 Rio Summit. Right, another nice photo up there between the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, and the president of Brazil. Let's take a look at another arrival right there on the red carpet of the G20 summit. Let's take a look at our list here and try to ascertain the next important guest joining the ranks of world leaders right here at the summit. And that is, you are looking at the chairperson of the African Union and the president of Mauritania, Mohamed Ould Ghazouani. And as we've informed earlier, the G20 summit this year is attended by the core 19 member states and countries plus 2 unions. One notably that has been present in the past years is the currently the chairperson of the African Union for 2024, Mohamed Ould Ghazouani, followed by Prime Minister of India, His Excellency Narendra Modi, walking in a very distinctive Indian attire, black and white, right there. Another close ally to Indonesia and a lot of different countries within the G20 member states. And notably, one of the leaders within the Troika leadership of the G20, as India was just assuming the presidency of the G20 last year, with the peak of it, the summit of G20 in November 2023 in New Delhi, and thus making him a Troika member, the Holy Triangle, if you can say it, for the 3 leaders within the G20 to continue on, to carry on previous principles, previous foundations of themes to the next presidency of the G20. Walking up the elevated ramps right there is Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. A warm shake hands. Looks like these two have come close in terms of very warm relations. You are witnessing such warm exchange there from the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and apparently a very, very gratuitous and joyous feelings from the presidents of Brazil with the presence of the Prime Minister of India. One by one, we are witnessing the leaders of the G20 member states. We have heads of states, heads of governments within the G20, and both of the unions, the European unions, with the presidents of the Commission, have made their way to meet the leader. And you are still watching our live coverage coming to you live from Rio de Janeiro as we wait for more arrivals to make up for a complete set of world leaders within the G20. In just a few minutes, we'll be back with more live pictures from Rio.
President Prabowo Subianto has arrived in Brazil after attending the APEC summit in Peru. The president's agenda in Brazil is to attend the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. G20 is a forum of countries with the largest economies in the world. Prabowo will also have bilateral meetings with a number of leaders of friendly countries on the sidelines of the agenda in Rio de Janeiro. President Prabowo Subianto and his entourage arrived at the Galeão Air Force Base on Saturday evening local time. A statement from the Presidential Secretariat Office says that Prabowo was welcomed by Commander of Airbase Colonel Aviador Fabio Ferreira Silva, Ambassador of Brazil to Indonesia Jorge Monteiro Prata, Indonesian Ambassador to Brazil Edi Yusuf, and Indonesian Defense Attaché to Brazil Colonel Rizal Ashwam Amanda.
Speaking in an Indonesia-Brazil business forum on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil on Sunday, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto said that Indonesia and Brazil had many similarities in various aspects. Those similarities, he said, could be a foundation to create a good synergy.
Arrival of the world leaders, and you can also see it a bit delayed right there on your screen. We'll see the flag momentarily. At this point, from the core members, we've had from the African Union, the European Union, we've had the arrival from the United Kingdoms, and the leaders from Turkey, South Africa, Saudi Arabia rather, South Korea, Mexico, Japan, Indonesia, for that matter, also President Prabowo Subianto, India, Germany, France, and also many other invited participating organizations and observing countries. Let's have a look now at who will be making the exit. We believe it is the Prime Minister of Italy. Giorgia Meloni is here. Very casually dressed instead of a blouse. So she opted for something more breathable right here in the tropical climate of Rio de Janeiro. We have Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, walking down the red carpet on her way to greet the President of Brazil. Well, if we remember, Italy also assumed the presidency of the G20 right before Indonesia, and that was back in 2021 in the thick of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the then Prime Minister handed over the presidency of the G20 to our then President of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, over in Rome, Italy. And then it rolled over to three very vibrant nations of the G20 members, Indonesia, India, and right here happening as we speak, Brazil. There you have it, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, warm hugs with the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. And another group of cars is spotted right there at the main entrance of the Museums of Belas Artes, or the Museum of Fine Arts here in Rio de Janeiro. We have right there exiting the vehicles and making his way on the red carpet the I would say the representations of Saudi Arabia. Let's have a closer look. Yeah, what we have on the list here from Saudi Arabia is the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, Faisal bin Farhad Al Saud, but apparently it is a different figure entirely. We can't make it up at the moment. Greetings there from a representative from Saudi Arabia with the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. And another arrival is spotted right there. Another very esteemed member of the G20 world leaders taking part for today's summit. Right there, there you have it. Mr. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada. Looking all dapper as always as he walks down the red carpet, greeted by the soldiers on each side of the carpet. And the Prime Minister himself was also present at both previous G20 summits in India and in Indonesia, in Bali to be precise. Looking all geared up to take part in the summit. And as always, if we can be sure, the first arrival is accompanied by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Brazil, all the way to the ramped up or the elevated platform until all these world leaders get to meet in person and shake hands and exchange warm greetings with the presidents of Brazil themselves. Right, a very, very tall Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Let's take a look at the next arrival right here for the day of G20 Rio Summit as we observe each and every one, world leaders making their way to greet the presidents. Another one is just around the corner. Yeah, we have Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, the upcoming presidency of the G20. He is an important member of the Troika leadership, again, as I said earlier, for the upcoming presidency of South Africa, where we have President Cyril Ramaphosa at the helm. Whether or not it's going to be in Cape Town or in Johannesburg, it remains to be seen, remains to be decided, but we believe all of these exciting and very beneficial working group meetings will take place across South Africa in 2025. Alongside the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Brazil there, walking towards the platform to meet the president. Exchanging pleasantries with the president of Brazil is His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. And there will be a special one-on-one meeting, we believe, with the current presidency, which is Brazil, with the upcoming presidency of South Africa on the sidelines of Rio de Janeiro summit. have it again, a very quick look at the conference room. A very, very quick look there, where all the actions, where all the discussions, the deliberations will take place, and whether or not the agreed declarations will be made, it remains to be seen. We'll look forward to the end of the day, where later on, all the members of the press right here at the International Media Center will be notified, will be informed of the key outcomes of the G20 summit right here. We're coming to you live from Rio de Janeiro.
Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto had a bilateral meeting with Secretary General of the United Nations Antonio Guterres on Sunday on the sidelines of his visit attending the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Speaking after the meeting, Prabowo said that he reaffirmed Indonesia's commitment in renewable energy.
Of the United Nations.
President Prabowo said that the UN Secretary Guterres greatly appreciates Indonesia's stance on various issues, especially on climate change, and that Indonesia strongly supports efforts to take steps in reducing carbon emissions. President Prabowo also explained that Indonesia has a big potential in green energy development, including geothermal, hydro, solar, and bioenergy. Prabowo also extended appreciation for Guterres' support towards action that have been taken by Indonesia. The meeting reaffirmed Indonesia's position as strategic partner in global stage, especially in climate change issues.
Extremely strategic, valuable partner in today's world. Indonesia was very active.
The bilateral meeting between Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto and Secretary General of the United Nations Antonio Guterres took place at a hotel in Rio de Janeiro, on the sidelines of Prabowo's agenda to attend the G20 summit in Brazil. Prabowo extended appreciation for Guterres' dedication in supporting peace and international justice. The president also expressed Indonesia's commitment to support the UN and readiness to deploying peacekeeping forces if needed, especially in Palestine. President Prabowo emphasized Indonesia's commitment to supporting the United Nations effort, including on issues such as food security, poverty eradication, human rights violation, and the crisis in Palestine. The president said his support aligns with international mandates to strengthen the peace efforts in the region. Regarding the issue of Palestine, Guterres agrees with Indonesia to encourage the establishment of a state and self-determination of the Palestinian people's independence.
Very ambitious. I plan in my new administration within 10 years, but on several issues we can go faster.
Speaking on the sidelines of his activities in the G20 summit in Brazil, President Prabowo Subianto said the schedule for a possible visit to Middle East countries is being worked out. President Prabowo has been scheduled to attend the G20 summit in Brazil and then depart to the UK to have a bilateral meeting with the UK Prime Minister. President Prabowo actually wanted to return to Indonesia immediately. However, he is still trying to find the right schedule to complete all the planned visits, as have been arranged previously. Previously, President Prabowo announced his state visit agenda in a press conference before he began his initial overseas trip on Friday, November the 8th. The president is scheduled to meet with world leaders and attend several high-level conferences. After concluding the state visit to China and the United States, he continues his tour to attend two summits, the APEC summit in Lima, Peru, and the G20 summit in Brazil. After Brazil, the president is then scheduled to depart to UK to meet the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer.
During a press conference in Rio de Janeiro on Sunday, Guterres told journalists 2024 was well on the way to break heat records days after leaving the COP29 meeting in Baku. He also emphasized the need for peace in Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan. G20 countries account for 85% of the world's economy and are the largest contributors to multilateral development banks, helping to steer climate finance. They are also responsible for more than three-quarters of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. Reaching agreement may only get tougher with the return to power of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, who is reportedly preparing to again pull the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord. UN Climate Chief Simon Still wrote a letter to G20 leaders imploring them to act on climate finance, including boosting grants for developing nations and advancing reforms of multilateral development banks.
Biden flew from Lima, Peru to Manaus, Brazil, in the largest city in the Amazon to meet with the local leaders working to preserve the rainforest. He was to head afterward to Rio de Janeiro for a summit of the group of 20 major economies that will address issues including poverty, global governance, and climate change. Biden also went to the Museum of the Amazon in Manaus, where he met with indigenous leaders who want to protect the rainforests. While at the museum, Biden signed a proclamation designating November 17 as International Conservation Day. While in the Amazon, Biden toured abroad his Marine One.
You are still watching our live coverage coming to you from the vibrant city of Rio de Janeiro as one after another of the world leaders within the membership of the G20. We have heads of states, heads of governments making their way to the main venue right here where we are reporting at the moment, the Museums of Bellas Artes, of the Fine Arts. There you have it, the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, exiting the car, walking down the red carpet to meet the leader of Brazil, President Lula da Silva, another important member of the G20, Australia. Australia, for that matter, has been paying a close attention to the current climate change, which has been front and center for the past couple of years over at G20 summits, starting from Indonesia and from India, previously Italy, and right here also there is a close attention paid to the sustainable industries and green economy, circular economy, all leading up to the betterment of our efforts towards addressing and tackling climate change. And Australia, for the region of the world that they represent, has been also a close ally to Indonesia in championing the efforts towards tackling climate change. There you have it, a pleasant exchange between the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, with the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. Another car is pulling up the driveway. to be welcomed to the G20 Rio Summit right here in the city of Rio de Janeiro. Making up the final parts, we have the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. Well, this is quite a thorn on the side of each presidency of the G20, starting with Indonesia's presidency. As you remember, under the presidency of Indonesia, the war in Ukraine, the conflicts and the invasion of Russia into the country has just started, and thus inflaming all of the discussions and causing disagreement and dispute in between all these member countries. We remember distinctively and vividly all the heated discussions and arguments within the working group meetings and the ministerial meetings of the G20 under Indonesia's presidency back in 2022. And the president, the top leader of Russia, was never present. It was always represented by the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, at all of these different ministerial livings all the way leading up to the summit of G20 since 2022 under Indonesia. And also the same case in 2023 under India's leadership. And right now, history repeats itself as we see another presence of the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, instead of the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, right there greeting the president of Brazil. Another arrival there, let's have a quick look. We have the flag of China, expecting President Xi Jinping very, very soon, making his way to greet the president. A bit of an elevated tensions right there as we expect a very strong economy. The leader of China, Xi Jinping, there he is in navy suits, red or rather maroon tie, walking down the red carpet, exerting his influence on the table of the G20 summit. Xi Jinping, the president of the People's Republic of China. We are getting closer and closer to the completion of arrival of each and every G20 leaders right here in Rio de Janeiro, signifying the start to the summit of the G20 under Brazil's presidency. We believe right after China, it will be the turn of the United States, but it remains to be seen. There you have it, walking up the ramp, President Xi Jinping of China. A hugely influential economic-wise member of the G20, China has been long known to have a very firm stance on their principles, and thus asserting influence in all different members of the G20. And the presence of President Xi Jinping himself solidifies the influence, the strength of China on these other member states of the G20. We're still coming to you live from Rio de Janeiro as with bated breath we wait for the final arrivals of world leaders right here to attend the G20's Rio summit. at the Museum of Bellas Artes, right as predicted, that is the very flag of the United States, meaning that President Joe Biden, during the last months of his presidency of the United States, will be attending the G20 summit this year. As we know, the United States has just completed their elections a few weeks back, with the elect President Donald Trump again taking the office on January the 20th to be sworn in, meaning that this will be the final edition of Joe Biden's participation, President Joe Biden's, right here for the G20 summit. The world is waiting as to how the upcoming administration of the United States will change the course of its foreign policy, particularly reflecting back into the term of Donald Trump, 2016 to 2020. A lot of changes there, exiting the Paris Climate Agreement, threatening to exit NATO, and a lot of different policies that have been set by the previous or the former president, Donald Trump, who is now taking the reign again coming January 2025. Let's wait for more pictures coming in from inside the arrival venue of the Museums of Bellas Artes. We still have yet received pictures from the inside. One would wonder what exactly is happening. Right, there you have it. Exiting the car, President Joe Biden of the United States of America. Looking in high spirit, all smiles, greeting the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Brazil and pacing towards the President of Brazil right there on the red carpet. And again, as we wait for the main event of the summit to start, let's go over the planned itinerary of the day again. The arrival of international delegations, including the world leaders of the G20 members, have just concluded with the arrival of President Joe Biden, soon to be seen walking up the ramp right there to meet the President of Brazil. And then later on, the official opening of the summit will be underway with the very special opening remarks set to be delivered by the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Moments from now, we'll wait for the arrival of President Joe Biden up the ramp towards the President of Brazil. Yet to be seen. And then on the second half of the day, the resumption of broadcast of the G20 summit will begin, featuring the part of our short photos and the official opening of the second session, also featuring the speech by President Lula da Silva, and the much awaited part of the day, planned to be held at 5 p.m. Local time, that is Rio de Janeiro time, the press conferences, where we get to see the final outcomes, the key deliverables, declarations of these leaders of what they have agreed on or what they have not agreed on. That remains to be seen on the final part of the day today. And it is also very important to note the fact that the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty has been set another achievement under the Brazil's presidency this year. A lot of these countries have come together, made agreements, made efforts involving communities, organizations, and non-profit organizations as well to come together and to work together against hunger and poverty exacerbated by geopolitical tensions around the globe. We are wondering as to where the, I mean, looking at the picture right now as to where the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is. He has yet to arrive at the elevated platform. He has made his arrival moments ago, but he has yet to arrive at the spot where he would be greeting and shaking hands with the presidents. Right. A lot of us here would wonder if he takes a special route, a hidden path, if you were to call it, to get to the point where he would be shaking hands with the presidents. That remains to be seen. Right, as we wait with bated breath right now, the final moments where the arrival of the President of the United States, apparently there he is a bit busy there in the background. Now, President of the United States, Mr. Joe Biden, walking up the red carpet to greet the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. Yeah, we were correct indeed. He took an alternate route to get to the point where he will be greeting the president instead of walking up the ramp where the other world leaders did earlier today. And with that, it's safe to say that the first day of the summit here in Rio de Janeiro for the G20 summit will be rolled out very, very soon, moments from now. Quick photo up now. President of the United States, Joe Biden, with President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. With the backdrop of the breathtaking view of Rio de Janeiro on the other side there, Christ the Redeemer, the notorious, massive, gigantic statue of Jesus Christ on top of a hill as the backdrop to the summit today. Very, very exciting indeed. Take a quick break now as we wait for the official opening of the summit day one here in Brazil to unveil. And we'll be right back after the short messages. Do stay with us right here on TVI World.
President Prabowo Subianto has arrived in Brazil after attending the APEC summit in Peru. The president's agenda in Brazil is to attend the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. G20 is a forum of countries with the largest economies in the world. Prabowo will also have bilateral meetings with a number of leaders of friendly countries on the sidelines of the agenda in Rio de Janeiro. President Prabowo Subianto and his entourage arrived at the Galeão Air Force Base on Saturday evening local time. A statement from the Presidential Secretariat Office says that Prabowo was welcomed by Commander of Airbase Colonel Aviador Fabio Ferreira Silva, Ambassador of Brazil to Indonesia Jorge Monteiro Prata, Indonesian Ambassador to Brazil Edi Yusuf, and Indonesian Defense Attaché to Brazil Colonel Rizal Ashwam Amanda.
Ah, yeah. Hey there, you're still watching our live coverage coming to you from the beautiful city of Rio de Janeiro, the heart where the actions is all taking place right here, the summit of G20. I'm Rahmat Idris. We are off to the final parts of the arrival right now. Having completed the array of arrivals today, we've seen President of the United States, Joe Biden, making his way to meet the President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, and also the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, and Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and all greeted warmly by the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. But apparently, not all of the arrival have made their way to the red carpet today. We are looking at right now another set of arrivals making their way soon to the main venue of the Museum of Fine Arts here in Rio de Janeiro. As the door is open, let's see, from Argentina. Yeah, we have the President, His Excellency Javier Milei, making his arrival to the red carpet. We are witnessing the final parts of the arrivals today as the President of Argentina has just arrived here at the G20 summit, signifying the start to the summit very, very soon. Now that with the Brazilian presidency of the G20 that started on the 1st of December 2023, today on the 18th of November 2024, we witnessed the final parts of the G20 presidency under Brazil. And tomorrow, the handover of the presidency will be conducted from Brazil to South Africa. The final parts of arrival right now is the President of Argentina on his way to meet and greet the President of Brazil. Warm greetings there of the two heads of government. Both presidents are very important, some of the biggest economies in Latin America, Argentina and Brazil. Another breathtaking aerial view of Rio de Janeiro, the capital of the G20 summit this year. And while we wait for the key event of summit to start, another notable achievement of the Brazilian presidency this year is the launch of G20 Social, where for the first time, organizations will bring civil society into debate, where they can participate and contribute to discussions and policy formulations regarding the summits. All of these different key elements playing into the mechanisms that will shape the way that the summit is held, which is today. It remains to be seen on how it goes. Another arrival there, apparently, for the world leaders here for the G20 summits of Rio de Janeiro. exiting the car there. We have another prominent world leaders making his way to greet the president. And that is the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro. Not necessarily a member within the G20, but a guest invitee to the summit. I guess all eyes are on Brazil, on the city of Rio de Janeiro right now, just to see how the first day of the G20 summit will unfold in this beautiful city. Some very important key discussions will take place today as a result of a year-long working group meetings. Hundreds of them have taken place over the year in different places here in Brazil. And with that, we believe that all the world leaders have arrived now that the presidents of Brazil, Lula da Silva, have also moved away from his recipient spot, moving into the transit, or rather the holding rooms, and then all of the delegates will move simultaneously to the main conference room of the summit, where we expect it will begin very, very soon. We'll be back with the visuals of that in just a few minutes. Stay with us right here on TVRI World.
Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto had a bilateral meeting with Secretary General of the United Nations Antonio Guterres on Sunday on the sidelines of his visit attending the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Speaking after the meeting, Prabowo said that he reaffirmed Indonesia's commitment in renewable energy.
Of the United Nations.
President Prabowo said that the UN Secretary Guterres greatly appreciates Indonesia's stance on various issues, especially on climate change, and that Indonesia strongly supports efforts to take steps in reducing carbon emissions. President Prabowo also explained that Indonesia has a big potential in green energy development, including geothermal, hydro, solar, and bioenergy. Prabowo also extended appreciation for Guterres' support towards action that have been taken by Indonesia. The meeting reaffirmed Indonesia's position as strategic partner in global stage, especially in climate change issues.
Extremely strategic, valuable partner in today's world. Indonesia was very active.
Right, you're still joining us here live from Rio de Janeiro as we come to you with a full coverage of the unfolding summits of the G20 right here under the presidency of Brazil, where we are looking at visuals where all the world leaders who have made their way around the red carpet to meet the presidents, they are all right there as you witness it for himself, the very proud host, the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, taking his seats very, very soon alongside all the esteemed members, the leaders of the G20 and all the observing countries and the invited participation organization leaders. And with that, we expect all of the discussions, the deliverables pertaining to social inclusions, fight against hungers, energy transitions, and sustainable development in social, economic, and environmental aspects, and more importantly, reform of the global governance institutions will be rolled out, signified by the opening remarks of the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Let's have a listen in to the summit of the G20 here from Rio de Janeiro.
Dentro de instantes, terá início a sessão de abertura da reunião de líderes do G20 Combate à Fome e à Pobreza. Pede-se a todos que tomem seus assentos e coloquem seus aparelhos celulares em modo silencioso. In a few moments, we will start the first session of the G20 Leaders Meeting. We are only waiting for the entrance of the leaders to begin. We kindly invite you to take your seats and set your cell phones in silent mode. Informamos que oferecemos o serviço de tradução simultânea. Orientamos que selecionem um canal correspondente ao seu idioma de preferência. We would like to inform you that the service of simultaneous interpreting is available as from now, and we invite you to select the channel corresponding to your language of choice.
Você fala com o embaixador da corporação, com o roteiro. Vai lá. Vou segurar, vou segurar. Perdão, o que você falou? Beleza. Você pode só aqui? Não, pode ficar à vontade. Obrigado. Lembra o embaixador que tem um pequeno roteirinho muito rápido e o vídeo. Ouviu, Paula? Relembra o embaixador que é um roteiro muito rápido e o vídeo da aliança, antes do presidente falar. Roteiro rápido, introdução, vídeo da aliança e o presidente fala.
Senhoras e senhores, bom dia. Sejam muito bem-vindos ao lançamento da Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza, iniciativa que reúne 81 países, a União Africana, a União Europeia, 24 organismos internacionais, 9 instituições financeiras e 31 fundações e entidades filantrópicas, além de outras organizações não governamentais. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the launching of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, an initiative that gathers 81 countries, the African Union, the European Union, 24 international bodies, 9 financial institutions, and 31 foundations and philanthropical entities, in addition to other non-governmental organizations. A Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza pretende acelerar ações para alcançar um desenvolvimento sustentável, unindo os países na erradicação da fome global e no combate às desigualdades sociais. The Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty aims to accelerate actions towards achieving a sustainable development, uniting countries in eradicating global hunger and fighting social inequities. Será exibido agora vídeo sobre a Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza. We now invite you to watch a video about the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty.
Enquanto houver famílias sem comida na mesa, crianças nas ruas e jovens sem esperança, não haverá paz.
We promised to eliminate extreme poverty and hunger until 2030. However, far from falling at the necessary pace, hunger and poverty are growing. If all the efforts made over the past decades to combat hunger and poverty have proven insufficient, a new approach is necessary and urgent. With Brazil chairing the G20, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva convened a task force to consider actions to change this reality. 5 reports were produced by international organizations with a clear diagnosis. Although the evidence strongly favors large-scale public programs and policies against hunger and poverty, the international community's support is increasingly oriented towards small pilot and temporary projects, leading to a fragmented and challenging scenario. And the world needs more, much more than that.
And I welcome the Hunger and Poverty Alliance being launched by President Lula. Hunger has no place in the 21st century.
The Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, an innovative initiative whose founding documents were approved by the G20 in July 2024, brings together countries, international organizations, and entities committed to creating a focused and action-oriented coalition. Many countries have successfully implemented policies and programs against hunger and poverty. We already know what works. What we need is to scale up finance and channel financial support and knowledge to where they are most needed, transforming lives.
A aliança combina interesses de países através de modelos e políticas públicas com eficácia comprovada e financiamento para sua implementação, com escala e alcance. Vamos nos unir para construir um mundo mais sustentável, mais solidário e justo para todos e todas.
Meus amigos e minhas amigas, o tempo para cumprirmos a nossa promessa de atingir os objetivos do desenvolvimento sustentável está se esgotando rapidamente. Essa é a nossa última oportunidade de alcançar essas metas. Embora a Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza tenha nascido no G20, ela pertence a todo mundo. Por isso, convido todos e todas a integrar a aliança e se somar a esse esforço pela erradicação da fome e da extrema pobreza, para que em 2030 possamos finalmente falar desses flagelos como problemas do passado. Muito obrigado e eu espero vocês.
Senhoras e senhores, com a palavra o presidente da República. For his remarks, we now invite the President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
Caros chefes de Estado e de governo, dirigentes de organizações internacionais, demais chefes de delegação, minhas amigas e meus amigos. Primeiro, eu quero agradecer a generosidade da presença de vocês, transformando o Rio de Janeiro na capital do mundo neste dia 18 de novembro e dia 19 de novembro. É muito importante o que vamos discutir aqui e eu tenho certeza que se nós assumirmos a responsabilidade com esses assuntos da fome e da pobreza, nós poderemos ter sucesso em pouco tempo. Por isso, eu queria dizer a todos vocês, sejam bem-vindos ao Rio de Janeiro. Aproveite essa cidade que é conhecida como a cidade maravilhosa. Esta cidade é a síntese dos contrastes que caracterizam o Brasil, a América Latina e o mundo. De um lado, a beleza exuberante da natureza, sob os braços abertos do Cristo Redentor. Um povo diverso, vibrante, criativo e acolhedor. De outro, injustiças sociais profundas. O retrato vivo de desigualdades históricas e persistentes. Estive na primeira reunião de líderes do G20, convocada em Washington no contexto da crise financeira de 2008. 16 anos depois, constato com tristeza que o mundo está pior. Temos o maior número de conflitos armados desde a Segunda Guerra Mundial e a maior quantidade de deslocamentos forçados já registrada. Os fenômenos climáticos extremos mostram seus efeitos devastadores em todos os cantos do planeta. A desigualdade sociais, raciais e de gênero se aprofundam na esteira de uma pandemia que ceifou mais de 15 milhões de vidas. Segundo a FAO, em 2024, convivemos com um contingente de 733 milhões de pessoas ainda subnutridas. É como se as populações do Brasil, México, Alemanha, Reino Unido, África do Sul e Canadá, somadas, estivessem passando fome. São mulheres, homens e crianças, cujo direito à vida e à educação, ao desenvolvimento e à alimentação são diariamente violados. Em um mundo que produz quase 6 bilhões de toneladas de alimentos por ano, isso é inadmissível. Em um mundo cujos gastos militares chegam a 2 trilhões e 400 bilhões de dólares, isso é inaceitável. A fome e a pobreza não são o resultado da escassez ou de fenômenos naturais. A fome, como dizia o cientista e geógrafo brasileiro Josué de Castro, a fome é a expressão biológica dos males sociais. É produto de decisões políticas que perpetuam a exclusão de grande parte da humanidade. O G20 representa 85% dos 110 trilhões de dólares do PIB mundial. Também responde por 75% dos 32 trilhões de dólares do comércio de bens e serviços e 2/3 dos 8 bilhões de habitantes do planeta Terra. Compete aos que estão aqui, compete aos que estão de volta desta mesa, a inadiável tarefa de acabar com essa chaga que envergonha a humanidade. Por isso, colocamos como objetivo central da presidência brasileira no G20 o lançamento de uma aliança global contra a fome e a pobreza. Este será o nosso maior legado. Não se trata apenas de fazer justiça. Essa é uma condição imprescindível para construir sociedades mais prósperas e um mundo de paz. Não por acaso, esses são os objetivos do desenvolvimento sustentável 1 e 2 da Agenda 2030. Com a aliança, vamos articular recomendações internacionais, políticas públicas eficazes e fontes de financiamento. O Brasil sabe que é possível. Como com a participação ativa da sociedade civil, concebemos e implementamos programas de inclusão social, de fomento da agricultura familiar e da segurança alimentar e nutricional, como o nosso Bolsa Família e o Programa Nacional de Alimentação Escolar. Conseguimos sair do mapa da fome da FAO em 2014, para o qual votamos em 2022, em um contexto de desarticulação do Estado de bem-estar social. Foi com tristeza que, ao voltar ao governo, encontrei um país com 33 milhões de pessoas famintas. Em 1 ano e 11 meses, o retorno desses programas já retirou mais de 24 milhões e meio de pessoas da extrema pobreza. Até 2026, novamente, sairemos do mapa da fome. E com a aliança, faremos muito mais. Aqueles que sempre foram invisíveis estarão ao centro da agenda internacional. Já contamos com a adesão de 81 países, 26 organizações internacionais, 9 instituições financeiras e 31 fundações filantrópicas e organizações não governamentais. Meus agradecimentos a todos envolvidos na concepção e no funcionamento dessa iniciativa já anunciaram contribuições financeiras. Foi um ano de trabalho intenso, mas este é apenas o começo. A aliança nasce no G20, mas seu destino é global. Que esta cúpula seja marcada pela coragem de agir. Por isso, quero declarar oficialmente lançada a Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza. Muito obrigado. Bem, meus amigos, daremos agora o início à discussão entre os membros do G20, começando pelos países da Troika. Por isso, eu quero passar a palavra para o primeiro-ministro Narendra Modi, da Índia, última presidência do G20.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, नमस्कार। सबसे पहले
There you have it, the opening remarks of the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who conveyed some very intriguing and very important facts to the table of the deliberations at the G20 summits for the first day today here, taking place in the heart of it, the Museums of Fine Arts in Rio de Janeiro. A few very important key issues and key takeaways that we can just elaborate. It was delivered in Portuguese indeed, but first he expressed his highest appreciations for the generosity of all the world leaders coming together at the table of the G20 summit right Summit here in Rio de Janeiro. And he said that all of these world leaders, big economies, developing economies, and all the observing countries, all the participating organizations, they need to take responsibility to address and to reach success in terms of coming up with solutions to hunger and poverty. His Excellency President of Brazil also mentioned the fact that currently the ongoing social unfairness, inequality have become such major concern. And thus, he records that in the past year alone, it has shown the highest number of armed conflicts since the Second World War and the hugest displacement ever of people. And that is to say, in regards to the current ongoing geopolitical tensions and the war in Ukraine and in the Middle East, the Palestine and in Lebanon as well. And on that fact, in regards to the global alliances against hunger and poverty, he mentions the data, the statistics from FAO, and that is in Food and Agriculture Organizations, on behalf of the UN, stating that over 770 million people suffering from malnourishment by 2024. And that is a few times the global populations of Brazil alone, he said. And the thing is, the lack of food, the hunger that these people are suffering from is not from the lack of food productions, but rather due to the inequality of distributions. He said that these people has the right to live, has the right to food and education, and we produce over 6 billion numbers of food per year. It is unacceptable, he said, that there is still hunger and also poverty in this world. And on that note, he mentioned the strength, the benefits of being within the G20. He said that the G20 comprises of 85% of over 100 trillion US dollars of world gross domestic products, the world's GDP, over 75% of the $32 trillion of trades of goods and services, and 2/3 contributors to the pollutions on the planet Earth. That is the staggering fact that he said. So it is the responsibility of all the major members of the G20 to share, and thus for the global alliances to give birth to. He said that it is an efficient public policy and financial resources that are needed within these global alliances. And right now, he is very proud to say that over 81 countries and 9 financial institutions have taken part in making contributions to the global alliances against hunger and poverty. That pretty much sums all the opening remarks from the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, which sets the foundations of all the discussions, of all the outcome of today's first day summit here in Rio de Janeiro. We look forward to 5 p.m. local time, where all the members of the press will be invited for the press conference, and we'll get a first-hand account of how the turnout, the key outcomes of the summit will be. In the meantime, I'm Rahmat Idris, and my camera person behind there, Danu Dirja. Thank you so much for watching. In the past couple of hours, we'll be bringing you the latest details at the end of the day. In the meantime, from Rio de Janeiro, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.